Good morning. Today I'm releasing my office's special examination into the Fayette County Public Schools. And from the outset, I want to acknowledge the contribution of the auditors who worked on this, from my Assistant State Auditor, Libby Carlin, Jason Johnson, Josh Winfrey, and Matthew Rice. In addition to myself, they'll be available to answer any technical questions that we may have at the conclusion of my remarks. This exam was launched last spring after we received allegations of mismanagement, waste and abuse, and possible criminal activity. Fayette School Superintendent Tom Shelton also requested, to his credit, that our office come in and look at the complaints, and I want to say I appreciate the cooperation by his administration with this examination. Auditors did not find evidence of alleged criminal activity. Let me be clear. We found no evidence of criminal activity. However, we did find chronic mismanagement of the district's budget and finances that have contributed to its financial instability. This examination found that, unfortunately, it wasn't always about kids. Sometimes it was about turf battles, and mismanagement of the finances of the state's second largest school district, with an annual budget of more than $400 million, is obviously troubling. But even more so is that there exists a culture within certain elements of management that does not reflect the district's purported values, and I think it's clear that we all know our children deserve better. Auditors identified problems related to salary and perk disparities between administrative and educational staff, excessive travel and training within one department, violations of the procurement process and other board policies, potential conflicts of interest, and other concerns. The complaint received by my office centered on a perceived $20 million discrepancy in the budget and whether that affected the district's current fiscal shortfall. Based on the original allegation, there was an implication that money was missing, or even a sense that there was wrongdoing. Let me be clear again. We found no evidence of criminal activity or wrongdoing. So what happened? Simply put, a flawed budget process resulted in faulty budget assumptions in the 2011 and 2012 budget. The net result is that 3 fiscal years later, students and teachers are feeling the impact. To say that the error has no impact on the current budget belies the facts and would be a hefty coincidence, given that the shortfall is roughly the same amount. Now I want to make one point to you that I think is critically important in trying to understand what happened here. In all large organizations, and I've seen it personally both in business and in government, there is a natural tension between budget officers and fiscal officers. Budget officers have to do their job in a way that demands precision, because that is the basis of your budget, your working document. The budget is a statement of values. It is your mission statement. It says these are our priorities and this is what we intend to focus on. But on the other side of that is a philosophical difference that you often find, that in a finance officers have to have flexibility to be able to manage cash flow. These are two very different philosophies, folks, and it doesn't make one right or wrong, and it often works well in organizations that are highly performing, assuming there is a level of cooperation. There was no such level of cooperation here. And the budget director did not become aware of certain financial transactions in a timely manner. Why? Because she relied on the finance director to provide information rather than seeking it out from verified sources. For his part, the finance director appeared to have little regard for the budget process, adopting a spend it until it's gone approach instead. Again, that is a cash management focus. Other members of management excluded the budget director from meetings and other important internal conversations. Members of upper management, including but not limited to the superintendent and his COO, were aware of the strained relationship between the budget and finance directors, and in my view should have recognized the shortcomings earlier in the budget process and worked to correct them. Folks, when you have people who have an inability to work together, it does create professional problems inside of an organization. And that balance between cash management. Now listen, I understand the focus on cash management. We're trying to run school districts when needs are increasing and resources are diminishing. Certainly districts need the flexibility to do their job, but it can't result in such a heavy focus on cash management that the budget becomes a sham. Because when you have a budget that is not an actual working budget, it denies the opportunity for oversight, it denies the opportunity for transparency, And I think we all know that if you're going to have accountability, you have to have transparency. This all led the budget director establishing a budget that reflected $20 million more than the district actually had available to spend. Subsequent budgets also contained errors leading to the passage of unbalanced budgets. So what about the financial transactions themselves? The financial transactions made by the finance director were not illegal, nor did the finance director fail to report them to KDE as was alleged. But auditors questioned whether the availability of the money was purposefully hidden from the school board and the public, and that's something that's going to have to be more fully understood. I understand that school districts, especially those with large budgets like this one, use complex accounting processes to balance their books. This is to be expected. But when vast sums are committed for various purposes and the decisions are made to routinely use those funds for different purposes after the budget process has ended, we question whether the intent is to conceal the true amount that is available to spend. Reporting a limited amount of available money by setting it aside for the use of district management to spend as it wishes impairs transparency and accountability. Another result of a broken fiscal process is that the board does not always have sufficient information to make informed decisions. The board, for example, was given monthly statements that show typical and often dramatic swings as revenue comes in and bills are paid. What the board wasn't given was a clear picture of the district's declining financial position over time. This isn't the only area where transparency to the board is questioned. Auditors found a lack of transparency in conveying the financial implications of altering the district's salary schedules. Unlike in past years, for the 2013-2014 school budget, management did not highlight significant changes to administrative pay when it presented the schedules for board approval. The administrative additive was increased from nearly $37,000 to $63,000. Auditors noted that over a 4-year period, the average pay increase for high-ranking administrators was 24.7%, while the average teacher pay increase over the same period was less than 10%. As a businessman, I understand the need to be competitive with others in order to keep, attract, and to retain talent. And I understand the need to be competitive with compensation packages. But we have to make sure that the way we spend our money is consistent with our values. And this is something that I think we all struggle with, because we've got to make sure that we value leniency and that we value effective fiscal management, particularly when we're cutting programs and can't provide teachers with the resources they need for the classroom. There are currently 11 Fayette County Public School teachers asking for money to buy basic supplies for their classroom, most of which are in high-poverty schools, on a national crowdfunding website, folks. The way we spend our money, even for people who are demonstrating even for people who have demonstrated the credentials and experience and who have earned those raises, I think that we have got to be increasingly sensitive to making sure that central administration exists as the servant of the classroom and not the master. And making sure that if there is pain to be shared, and most assuredly there has been pain in this district and most all other districts in Kentucky, making sure that that shared pain is felt equally in the central office as it is in the classroom is an important step forward. Parents struggle to afford items on long back-to-school lists, and teachers pay for resources for the classrooms out of their own pocket. Now teachers are having to take to the internet to get help in buying basic necessities like science kits and dictionaries, while administrators are granted big raises that aren't offered to teachers. I am particularly troubled by the use of a trust fund left to the district by a deceased Fayette County public school teacher for, quote, the enhancement and enrichment of the educational program. The district can use the interest on this fund and up to 10% of the principal each year, and the fund balance was $1.1 million in June 30th of 2014. This fund is used to grant loans to administrators for travel and training. When the use of these funds was discussed with the director, he indicated it would be problematic to promote the availability of these funds to teachers and others. Folks, when we have something that is available that ought to be used to benefit teachers, it needs to be communicated and marketed to them that that's available. $1,500 or $2,000 changes the academic year for a teacher when they can afford to buy materials that are lacking in the classroom. Other disparities in administrative and teacher perks exist. The Department of Financial Services spent more than $115,000 for travel, training, and reference books in a 4-year period. Auditors found unnecessary and excessive travel and training, and the district paid for the Director of Financial Services to receive his superintendent certification. Subsequent to this examination, he refunded the full amount to the district, to his credit. Fayette County Public Schools does not track who receives educational benefits or how much they cost, and they should. Auditors also found that management circumvented controls and violated its procurement process and contract with a vendor that provides college preparation services. The contract is a potential conflict of interest, but auditors found no evidence that the superintendent benefited personally or directly from his relationship with the vendor CEO. Auditors also found possible conflicts of interest in the district during the examination, which are outlined in finding 7. For 2 years, I have pressed school districts to keep their eye on the ball and not let resources get consumed in central offices rather than getting to the classroom where they can most affect student performance. It is especially critical at a time when administrators are asking everyone else, taxpayers, teachers, and parents, to give more and do with less. It's about making sure that the administrations are servants of the classrooms and not the master. And the work we have done here, I think, will provide a roadmap for the Fayette County Public Schools to drive structural reform, which is long overdue within the organization, and provide for the students and the taxpayers a central office administration that is a better servant to the people and rather than a master. I'll take any questions.
What are the ABCs to fix these issues?
I think what it speaks to is a culture that I think has been in place for some time. I will point out that this superintendent, Dr. Shelton, inherited the first budget from which we operated, which was the troublesome budget, which continued to compound the issues that we had. I think the lack of professional cooperation between the Director of Financial Services and the Director of the Budget is an excellent place to start. But when structures fail, people have the opportunity to, when structures fail, it's not conducive to good cooperation. And what happened here is the structure failed, and what the net result was a personality conflict that really stymied the district's ability going forward to build budgets that were based on actual numbers and to present to the board and the public a more robust view of what the financial situation of the district is. So that is a long way of saying, and I am confident that the administration and the board are going to choose to follow this path, is that clearly we need to restructure the operations of this office. It's going to require more hands-on oversight, in my view, from the superintendent and his COO. You cannot outsource and leave in a vacuum something as important as the fiscal management of a $400 million government, one that is literally the largest government in Fayette County.
How preventable was this deficit?
Well, you know, when we talk about the deficit and we talk about the failures in managing the financial situation, I want to be clear that we right-sized this. Certainly the breakdown in management was a contributor to the financial situation that we're in. But it's a contributor amongst things like a diminishing economy, increasing student base. These are all factors that conspired to put us into a school system in which there's no question expenditures are outpacing revenues. And I want to talk about an example of how not fully appreciating the accuracy of the budget picture we had affected management and the management of the financial operation of the school district. Is that the administration and the board made what I believe is an appropriate set of decisions to spend down their balance. You had the disappearance of stimulus monies that were funding incredibly important programs in the district, and there's no question that the decision to spend down the surplus that existed and the contingency fund was the right thing to do. But if we had had a more accurate picture of the true financial position of the district, we may have not have been so rapid in that spending. And that's the struggle. That's a real solid example of how not having an accurate picture of where you are affects the financial management of the organization.
So
What's the
$20
budget?
million was never missing.
It was never
just-
missing. Now, listen, I'm really glad you brought that up. This is difficult, and this is highly technical, and it took my auditors, who are the best watchdogs that you'll find anywhere, a lot of time to go over these numbers and try to get to the real facts. Now, you know, whether it's good or bad, we don't have the ability to waterboard people, so we can't get to intent. But we can follow the numbers. And the cavalier way that people were accused of criminal activity is something that is not healthy to the effective level of cooperation that we need to operate the school district. So, no, there was not an iota of evidence of criminal activity. And we've got to get past that. And if this becomes about personalities, folks, and it doesn't become what it needs to be, which is a laser-like focus on structural reform, the kids in Fayette County are never going to get the school system they deserve, and the taxpayers aren't going to get their right bang for their buck.
Did this $20 million mistake, or whatever you want to call it now, have any effect on any of the bonding issues that the district has been going through for construction or restructuring bonds?
Well, I don't believe so, but I would point out that the $20 million discrepancy in the 13-14 budget, right, Libby, 13-14 budget, these all run together, was caught by a rating agency. Not by a member of the board, not by an administrator, but an outside rating agency.
But do we know if that had any effect on?
Not that I'm aware of. And I want to point out, and I'll explain why, is that because these books are all reconciled at the end of the year, right? So when rating agency or lendors come in and evaluate the district, the issue is not where the district ends up at the end of the year. The issue is that you're managing through a budget based on numbers that aren't real.
So would you say that the budget office was being deceptive?
I don't know that, again, we can't get to intent. I would say that the unhealthy lack of cooperation between the finance office and the budget office failed to provide administrators and the board with an accurate picture of where the district stood. But in terms of being deceptive, that's just something we can't get to.
Do you have an idea of how long they may have had some information that should have been brought to light sooner?
Well, you know, when you have a total breakdown in communication, and I want to be clear, that's what was going on here. Over the 4-year period that we focused on, there was very little in the way of professional communication. And that's something that just can't be stomached. And I've made the point to the superintendent that this is something that's got to be sorted out. This just isn't about personalities, this is about structure. Because in great organizations, you want people who have different views, folks. You want them to be able to cooperate. That's what we're getting to. But when you have such divergent views on how things ought to manage, overlaid with an incredible personality conflict, what you get is tumult in the organization, when that's the last thing we need, particularly when it comes to painting an accurate picture of where the district is financially.
Can you talk about transparency in this entire process?
Well, I will say to the district's credit, they have been incredibly cooperative to us, making everyone available that we wanted to talk to, providing us the information we needed throughout the investigation. But clearly what happened over this 4-year period was that there was a lack of transparency. And this is why budgeting is so important. Folks, I get this isn't sexy, but this is why actual budgets are important. Because if you have a real budget in place, you have transparency, and then therefore you have accountability. And we didn't run this the way it ought to have been run. And that's not to say that there was some massive conspiracy to conceal information. But what it means is that the people who run the district and the people who oversee that in the position as members of the school board ought to have all the information they need to make value judgments about how the district's performing.
You mentioned how Superintendent Shelton inherited the problem. At what point should he have acted?
Well, listen, he inherited a faulty budget, to be sure. I think Superintendent Shelton should have and needs to be more directly involved with sorting out that conflict. But again, I don't think marriage counseling is what we need here. I mean, we need a structural change. We need a structure that guarantees direct involvement from not just the superintendent, but from his chief operating officer, who is the person between he and the two parties that we've mentioned earlier. We have to have a structural change. If we get in the business of saying this is about so-and-so's personality and against another person's personality, we have almost completely missed the boat. This is about a broken structure that was exacerbated by two professionals who didn't communicate professionally.
How extensive are the salary and product disparities, excessive travel and training, violations of procurement, in those areas? How extensive a problem is there?
Well, I want to point out that unlike our investigation into the Jefferson County Public Schools, folks, which was a to Z comprehensive review and performance audit where we evaluated the complete financial operation of the district, this was specific to a set of allegations that were made in a very public sense that revolved around the finance office. And when we talk about travel in particular, I think there certainly needed to be more oversight in being able to justify the value of that travel to the district. I will give Superintendent Shelton some credit. We've run into this issue within this system in other departments. You'll remember last year there was an issue with special education administrators traveling in a way that didn't give the appearance that it was really about directing a benefit to the district. So these issues are being addressed, and every issue that we have come up with here is not something that hasn't been addressed. Many things are being addressed, but the travel, $115,000 over 4 years seems to us to be excessive. But beyond that, let's not get lost in the number. What's important, Stu, is being able to direct and to be able to explain what is the demonstrable benefit to the district for that travel. And given that we've got teachers in the classroom, not just in this system, but I don't know a school teacher anywhere in Kentucky that's not spending money out of their pocket to buy materials for our kids. And many teachers aren't getting consistent or regular raises, although there have been some here in the Fayette County Public Schools. It's about communicating that you get it, right? It's about an organization saying, we get that times are tough, and if there's going to be pain, particularly against the backdrop of a difficult economy and a state government that is not doing its job and is failing to fully fund education, the administrators have to demonstrate to the frontline employees, which more generally are teachers, that they get it. Shared sacrifice is important.
Given the unhealthy relationship, poor communication, do you think a structural change is possible with the current personnel in the central office?
A strong leader backed by a reformist board can do anything to any organization they want. And what I think the central theme of this report is that it screams for reform. We have got to restructure the organization. And there are conversations that I've been made aware of where restructure conversations have been ongoing inside the district as we have been conducting our examination, which is how it should work. But parents, taxpayers, people who care about public education have a right to see, in my view, demonstrable movement towards reform in fairly short order.
With the Stoner Fund, you got the feeling from that teachers didn't even know about it, and they didn't want teachers to know about it?
I got the feeling that very few people actually knew about it. And keep in mind, this was a trust set up by the estate of a teacher. I think it was in the 60s or in the 70s. It's been around for a very long time. And it was being used to make loans to administrators to cover things like travel. And I have a problem with that, given that its express purpose was for the enrichment of the educational experience in the district. This is something that ought to be marketed to teachers, particularly the 11 who are on crowdfunding sites trying to get dictionaries and science kits for their kids.
Did you have a chance to, did you personally, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, they're going to respond at 1:30, but what was the reaction when you sat down with Dr. Shelton?
Well, Dr. Shelton and I have been in regular contact throughout this process. To his credit, he did ask for it, and I think it's not so much the words. I think it's going to be measured by the deeds. A few nights ago, I saw an email that went out from Dr. Shelton and the administration to the parents in the district, and I thought it was pitch perfect. We recognize that there are problems that we need to address, that we need to fix, and we're going to go about that process in short order. But words are easy at a time like this. I think it is What I'm going to be looking for, and I think indeed people who care and value public education, is what is the specific plan for restructuring this incredibly important part of the district? Yeah.
I saw in the audit that there were people that didn't want to talk to auditors on the property.
Sure.
And some of them requested meetings off-site. That's somewhat troubling that they couldn't talk freely there, but how many people, and maybe this is can be answered by the people that were there, refused to talk that may have information that could have been helpful?
If anybody refuses, my auditors drink a lot of coffee, folks. It's not unique for them to go to meet with people off campus. But did anybody deny an opportunity to speak, fellas? I don't think so. I think we got open cooperation with everybody that we wanted to talk to, and probably heard from a few that we didn't.
Can you explain the process of the audit, how it began, finished, how much time?
Sure. So last spring, there were a number of very public allegations made about the financial condition of the school district. And some turned out to be responsible and others were not. And as this played out in the media, we began to get our team ready to go in, and I got a call from Superintendent Shelton. He said, we really need to clear the air. I recognize that there are some things that we've probably not done in the best manner, but I'd like you to come in and do a thorough evaluation of the allegations, and let's just see where it goes. And that's what we've done. And our auditors have spent a lot of time over the last several months trying to conclude this audit. I will point out that when we got inside the organization, we became deluged with new allegations, many that were just wild, out of nowhere allegations, but it still takes the time of our professional staff a lot of time and energy to vet through those. So what we were able to come up with is the report that you've got today, which in my view is something that speaks for the need for real reform within the district.
Did you see or experience any documents that you couldn't find?
No.
In his response, Superintendent Shelton said there were serious inaccuracies in 4 of the report's 10 findings, and that he also took issue with the language in the report that seemingly vilifies one employee, Rodney Jackson, while minimizing the impact of the mistakes of others. Can you respond to that?
I don't think that holds any water. We don't vilify anyone. We follow the facts, and we don't go an inch beyond the facts, nor do we retreat an inch from them. And I think what's clear from the professional staff that we have here in the auditor's office is that this was a clear-eyed evaluation of where the district is, what its strengths and weaknesses are, and that's all reflected in the report. Okay, folks, going once. Listen, well, I appreciate the opportunity. I think the fact that we've got such a big crowd demonstrates that there is a real commitment to the schools here. Thank you for being here.